A couple of months ago, I made a video where I got people to assign colors to each of the 12 months of the year, and then I analyzed the data in various ways. That video did particularly well, so I decided to do the same thing with 4 different topics. This video is part 1 of that 4-part series where I'll be covering the data for school subjects. Out of every single possible topic to assign colors to, this was by far the most widely requested, and the most submitted to on the forum. Unlike the months, in which there are unwaveringly 12 of, there are plenty of potential school subjects that could be eligible for this poll. I didn't want to select too many because I was worried that this might dissuade people from submitting, and I thought the data would probably be not as interesting for super specific subjects. I generally wanted to go for options that most people would know and potentially have a color selection for. This led me to generally discarding university or college only courses and focusing primarily on high school subjects, as I figured a solid chunk of my audience likely hasn't hit post-secondary yet. Also, things like poetry and literature, while absolutely very different subjects, would be combined into just English, as most high schools didn't tend to have them separated out. I ended up doing this for every single subject. Although, in hindsight, I probably should have made an exception for chemistry, biology, and physics, but oh well. That gave me these 9 subjects that most people generally would know and have taken. I also decided to completely scrap all classes for non-English languages, since the audience of people taking this poll come from all around the world, meaning the actual languages people had as classes would be very different. I considered making one option as foreign languages, but I figured this would probably lead to pretty annoying data for the same reasons. I think languages would be better in a kind of poll for those languages and not lumped in with the school subjects anyways. With that out of the way, in 3 cases I also combined different subjects into one color selection, with the help of a couple of friends' input, since different high schools have different names for these subjects, despite being generally pretty similar. We have business, finance and economics, technology, computers and coding, and home ec, nutrition and childcare. That brings us up to a total of 12 subjects for this poll, which I figured is a pretty solid number. Overall, the forum got 1,910 different responses, and each of the school subjects got, on average, 1,746 submissions. This ranged from 1,469 for the least submitted to school subject and 1,865 for the most submitted to school subject. Just like with the months to colors video, I'm going to go through each subject one by one, share their top colors, alongside the most common reasonings for each of the top colors. Then, after I finish all 12 subjects, we'll proceed to the miscellaneous section where I talk about other interesting stats that I found, such as seeing how certain countries diverge from the norm. So, let's get on with it. Unlike the months, the school subjects don't exactly have a definitive order, so what I've decided to do is start at the school subject that got the least votes overall, and go upwards, ending with the subject with the most votes. Our first subject is home ec, nutrition, and childcare, with 1,469 votes overall, and a winning color of light pink with 108 votes. Out of all 12 school subjects on this poll, this one had the least agreement on the color, as the winning color was only selected by 7.35% of the population. Right behind light pink, and I mean literally right behind, we have light green with 107 votes, only a single vote of separation between the top 2. Following that we have light orange in 3rd, orange in 4th, and light yellow in 5th. There are 2 patterns we can see with this subject. The first one is that the pastel colors tended to dominate over the fully saturated and darker counterparts, and the second one is that cooler colors such as purple and blue tended to be less chosen than warmer colors such as orange and yellow. The most common reasoning for choosing colors for this subject were that people tended to associate this class with a cozy, soft, or comforting vibe. This is what led to the pastel colors being chosen more than anything else. As for individual colors, light pink ended up being the most chosen option, primarily because people associated it with being a more traditionally feminine subject. A couple of people even recognized within their answers that this association was misogynistic, but that it was still the color that was ingrained into their head. As for the other colors, light green, light orange, and orange were also heavily chosen because of the nutrition aspect. People tended to associate the greens, specifically light green, with healthy foods such as vegetables, and associated the oranges with baking foods such as bread and muffins. The second least chosen subject was drama with 1,554 submissions and a winning color of dark red with 189 submissions, or 12.16% of the vote. In 2nd and 3rd, we have another one-off battle, with red taking 2nd with 112 votes, and black taking 3rd with 111. In 4th place is purple with 101, and tied for 5th is dark purple and red pink, both with 90. The most common reason for dark red, which propelled it to the top, was that dark red, or red, is the color that is associated with the stage curtains on theaters. The reds were also generally chosen because of the association with love or passion, or just strong emotions in general, although this association often led to other bright colors as well, such as the purples. Finally, another common association I noticed was that people associating drama with either white or black because those are the colors of the drama masks. Next up we have business, which had 4 standout colors. Dark green in first with 191 votes, yellow in second with 171, green in third with 164, and grey in fourth with 141. In fifth, we have another tie with both yellow green and light green at 86. There was a very distinct association that propelled the greens, particularly dark green, to the top. The fact that green, or dark green, is the color associated with money and dollar bills, which is what this class tended to focus on. This is also the same reason that propelled yellow to the top, except instead of dollar bills, the yellow association came from gold or gold coins. As for the color grey getting so many votes, this was primarily due to people associating it with corporations and grey uniforms, and people considering it a dull or boring subject, calling grey the most dull and boring color. Our fourth subject is gym or phys ed, which had 1,736 submissions and a clear winner of the color orange to represent it, with 247 submissions or 14.23% of all submissions. In second place is red with 130 submissions, and then a tie between third and fourth with yellow and grey, both at 115 submissions. Rounding out the top 5, we have white with 106 submissions. Orange ended up being the most common association for 2 reasons. Our first reasoning was that orange was the color of the floorboards, or just the general color of the room that they took this class in. The second one was that they chose orange because of basketball, which oddly enough ended up being the most common sport to first come to mind. Another reason orange ended up being particularly common was from people associating it with heat, or making them hot or sweaty, although this was less common with just orange and more associated with any of the hot colors. Red was also chosen for representing blood, either because the activity gets the blood pumping, or because people have some memorable experiences in the gym that were, well, let's just say injuries. Next up is music with a total of 1,759 submissions. 2 colors really rose to the top, with black in first with 233 submissions and purple in second with 224 submissions, 13.25% and 12.73% respectively. After that, there's a jump down to third place, which is violet with 115 submissions, then blue-purple in fourth with 105, and pink rounding out the top 5 with 89. The most common reason that people gave for black was that musical notes are written in black, which is really fascinating that this impacted music so hard, considering all other subjects are also written in black text, but it stood out for music much more. Other much less common reasons for black were music stands, instrument cases, and piano keys. As for why purple was chosen a lot, I don't know. A lot of the people that selected purple didn't really give any reason at all. The most common reason that I could find was relating it back to music note emojis, but even then, those were 1, barely anyone, and 2, split between people who know the emoji as being either purple or blue. And the blues didn't have very many submissions, so I'm still left wondering what makes purple have so many submissions. Art had a total of 1,767 submissions and had clear domination in the pinks, purples, and red. The most common color was pink with 195 submissions, or 11.04%, followed by red in second at 180, red pink in third at 168, purple in fourth at 157, and white in fifth at 152. We were very close to having a 5th place tie for the third time with violet at 151, but they fell just 1 submission short. Pinks and purples ended up as the most common colors because of people just viewing them as the most artsy or creative colors. White ended up being a common choice because of associating it with a blank canvas or an empty sheet of paper. As for why red was chosen so often, I struggled to find a common reason in the responses, but I did get a handful that talked about it being the first color in the rainbow, or associating it with the letter A, which people also consider red, but these were much less consistent than reasonings for the purples, pinks, and white. Next up is technology, computers, and coding with 1,770 submissions. This subject's most chosen color was cyan with 191 submissions, or 10.79%, followed by gray in second with 171, dark green in third with 139, green in fourth with 131, and light gray in fifth with 116. Once again, there was ever so barely not a tie for fifth, with sky blue only a single submission under light gray. The most common reason for cyan was that cyan was very much a cyber, futuristic, or as a lot of people said, techie color. Green and dark green similarly were associated with microchips, motherboards, the Matrix, and generic hacker tropes in movies in a dark room with green numbers. All of the grayscales also got a significant number of submissions, which was largely because they were associated with the physical colors of computers and machines. Next up we have geography with 1,806 submissions, the most clear-cut subject yet, as 361 people chose dark green to represent it, aka 19.99% of submissions, a higher percentage than any other subject so far. In second place we have green with 261 submissions, then brown in third with 162, orange in fourth with 119, and sky blue in fifth with 116. The most common reasoning here revolved around landscapes, forests, grass, anything natural, which almost always led to a shade of green being selected. Similarly, dirt, soil, ground, and just earth were also very common reasons, but instead led to the brown and orange selections more than anything else. There were also a number of people who chose the blues, particularly sky blue, because it reminded them of the color of water, once again looping us back to the color of the earth being dominated by the water of the oceans. The fourth most submitted to subject was history, with 1,857 submissions. History had a clear winner, with brown being submitted the most out of any other color at 474 submissions, or 25.53% of all submissions. It's the first subject where the winning color had over a quarter of the submissions. In second place, we had yellow with 246 submissions, then orange in third with 215, yellow-orange in fourth with 125, and finally red in fifth with 88. The most common association people gave was relating history with being old, which led to largely brown being selected to represent that, but also a lot of oranges and yellows. In a similar vein, people also tended to associate history with certain old things, such as paper and books, old maps, and the sepia color of old photographs, which only compiled onto these three colors even more. A decent number of people also associated history with bloodshed and death from various wars and conflicts, which led to red and dark red being chosen more than any other colors. These reasons weren't nearly as significant as the ones for brown, yellow, and orange, but they were still present. Before we get to the top 3, I have some miscellaneous stats. The top 3 submitted to subjects were math, English, and science, and they all differed by only one single submission. One of these subjects has easily the most agreed upon color, and the other two both had extremely unique splits. A common reasoning for choosing colors across the entire board was either folder colors or the notebook covers that people used when taking these subjects. This was a fairly notable reason for almost every single subject, but it was especially domineering for these top 3 specifically, which is why you'll see that the results for these subjects are less focused on one color group, like how art was focused on the purples and pinks, and more focused on very separate, distinct colors. Or, well, you'll see that math and English were focused more on separate, distinct colors, while science was the most unanimously agreed upon color, with 672 people selecting green as their choice. This was 36.07% of the submissions. In second place is dark green with 256 submissions, followed by yellow-green in third with 106, and then another 5th place tie with both cyan and blue at 85. The reasonings for science actually surprised me a little bit. My expectation was that green would win because people would associate it with nature and plants, which was the most significant reason. However, right below it, also associating it with green, were people who associated it with chemicals in a beaker or test tube. Another example of media shaping the perceptions of colors for these subjects, just like how cyan and green being seen as cyber-futuristic and a color associated with hackers affected the technology submissions. When we look at the lower selected colors for science, we can also see that bright and fully saturated colors had a much likelier chance at being selected compared to the lighter and darker counterparts, especially in the cyans and blues. This was largely due to the aforementioned folder colors, as people tended to have brightly colored folders or notebooks for these subjects, but the blues and cyans were also a tad bit higher than the rest because of the chemical association, with some seeing chemicals as blue and cyan over green. Our second to last subject was English, in which we see a very unique pattern here, unlike anything we'd seen before. With this subject, it's our 3 primary colors, red, yellow, and blue taking the lead, and I guess sky blue. Red takes first place with 393 submissions, or 21.08%, followed by yellow in second with 295, and then blue and sky blue in third and fourth with 190 and 176 submissions respectively. And then there's green in fifth with 66, but who really cares? English was especially dominated by folder colors, much more than science, and the reason that red, yellow, and blue were selected more than other colors was because English was viewed as a core or primary subject, and thus people chose a core or primary color, in paint, to give to that subject. That made people more likely to choose one of these 3 colors, although I also imagine that sky blue can largely be lumped in with blue here, since notebook colors tended to be a bit less of an intense blue than that shade of blue. That's not to say that there weren't other common reasons at all though. Some of the submissions also related it to the English or American flag, which usually led to red and blue associations. Also, really weird one, but 6 people mentioned the teacher has an apple trope, and all 6 of them related it specifically to the English teacher. This is either an extremely odd coincidence, or English teachers happen to be associated with apples more than other teachers. Apart from that, basically everything was just the notebook and folder colors. Finally, we end at math, which precisely proves my point in why I think for this specific dataset, the mode is so much better than the mean. Red is the winner with 549 submissions, or 29.44%, followed by blue with 368, and sky blue with 264. Then, dark blue and green in 4th and 5th with 79 and 66, but who really cares? So red clearly wins here, but again, a lot of people chose sky blue instead of regular blue, likely because it was a bit less intense of a color, so if we were to add those together, blue actually beats red. So, is math red or blue? Results inconclusive. I'm going to treat math as red for now though. The most interesting thing about the results for math though is that yellow is so much lower than in English. This had an equal level of dominance on notebooks and folders being the central reasoning, as English did, so why is yellow so much lower? Well, I couldn't exactly find a reason for this, but I do have a hypothesis. A lot of people mentioned math, English, and science being the core 3 subjects they thought about when they thought of school. People also tend to view red, yellow, and blue as the central colors, thanks to being the 3 primary colors in paint. A lot of people mentioned that they saw math as the central subject taught in school, before thinking of science or English. Likewise, I imagine when choosing colors for their notebooks, when people think of a central color, they either think of red or blue instead of yellow. So my hypothesis is that the association came from them associating the most prominent school subject with the most prominent color, leading to significantly more red and blue submissions than yellow. I'm not completely sure if this is the reason though, so let me know in the comments if you think there's a different reason. I also think that this idea that math is the central subject might be due to my audience who filled out this poll probably being a bit more geared towards math over other subjects, considering some of the videos I've made in the past. While the notebooks and folders were the most common reason, there were still some other reasons. A decent number of people chose red because they said that math makes them angry or otherwise feels intense, and red is often seen as an intense and angry color. A decent number of people chose blue, or sky blue, because they view it as a very technical or logical subject, and they view blue as the most technical or logical color. There's not really any more common reasons that I could find, and these ones weren't really that common, so let's move on. Here's all of the results for all of the school subjects compacted neatly into a single stacked bar chart, cause it's really satisfying to see them all together. And a super wide version to see the smaller colors better. Now, looking strictly at the most chosen colors per subject, we actually only have 2 repeats, business and geography both with dark green, and math and English both with red. If we wanted each subject to have a different color, we can compare both of these pairs, keep the one with the most submissions, and choose a different color for the one with the least. Geography gets to keep dark green over business, and math gets to keep red over English. Both of these subjects' second choices were yellow. English had 295 submissions for yellow, while business only had 171, so English gets to take yellow. Business's third choice, green, is already taken by science, so we move down to the 4th most chosen color, which was gray. Now all 12 subjects have unique colors. Wow, that was much easier than the months. Next up, let's average out the data for each month. As discussed in my last video about averaging colors, I'm going to show both the averages using the RGB system, color corrected for human vision, and the averages using the HSV system to get brighter colors. Here are the HSV averages. As you can see, this kind of proves my point for why averaging this data doesn't work very well, at least with math and English. Because math and English were so split between a couple of extremely different choices, their averages kind of suck, especially maths, as the near equal blue and red intensity just gave us the shade of purple, which is completely inaccurate to the results, as barely anyone at all chose the purples for math. At least English is a little bit closer, with an orange tint that is at least a little bit close to red, but this still does not work well at all. Apart from those two, the other colors are much more accurate with their averages, and all of these make a pretty satisfying rainbow when combined. Though, I can't lie, the blues are lacking a bit here. Here are the RGB averages. Here, we can see subjects such as English and home ec are significantly grayer than subjects like science and art, obviously because these subjects were much less centralized to one specific color region. This rainbow is a lot less satisfying to look at, but honestly, still pretty nice at the bottom. Another question I asked is what country everyone was from, because again, I wanted to see if there would be any interesting differences per country. The country representation was basically the exact same as the last poll, with US far and away in first place, the UK in second, and Canada in third pretty easily, followed by Australia and Brazil tied for 4th and 5th. The Philippines ended up breaking the 50 submission barrier this time though, falling just short of it in the month's poll. I initially thought there wouldn't be super significant differences between countries for this poll, however, I was wrong. Out of the 6 countries above 50 submissions, there were a lot of interesting small differences and 4 really big ones. I didn't look at any of the lesser submitted ones because there just was not enough data for me to make conclusions from. Let's go through a handful of the subjects individually and note where certain countries diverged. Starting with business, nearly every country chose dark green or yellow, which were the top 2 submissions, except for Australia, which chose light green, which was all the way down in 5th in the overall poll. I hypothesized this was because Australians had light green dollar bills, but no, Australian money is super colorful, so I actually don't know. History was the singular subject that was unanimously chosen as one color across the board, with every single country having a majority on brown. Australia and the Philippines were especially heavy on choosing brown for history, more than any of the other countries, whereas the United States actually very nearly had yellow takeover as the number one choice for history. Geography had a similar story in which nearly every single country chose dark green, with Australia especially heavy on dark green, but the one difference was that Brazil oddly had a much higher percentage of orange submissions, tying with dark green. Technology had a couple of minor differences. Firstly, the United Kingdom was much more split, winning with dark blue, Canada ended up winning with grey, and Brazil favored the greens over the cyans. We saw that music had a split between black and purple, in which black won, but 3 countries ended up with purple winning. Australia had purple just barely win over black, while Canada and the United Kingdom had a much stronger purple win over black. Then, the United States also had a stronger win with black, and the Philippines was the strongest on black out of any country. English was split between red, yellow, and the blues. Red came out on top for the overall poll and the United States, but a number of countries had yellow as the winning color. This includes the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and the Philippines. None of them were particularly dominant with yellow, however, red was always close behind. These last 4 subjects are where certain countries had the largest or most interesting changes. Math, as we saw, was split between red and the blues, usually with red winning, but 4 countries had different things happen. Australia actually tied between sky blue and red, Brazil won with blue, and the United Kingdom won much more clearly with sky blue. The Philippines, on the other hand, had green just barely win out over red, which is quite bizarre, as green wasn't particularly chosen for any other country. I have no idea why this happened at all, when math was so dominantly red and blue for every single other country. There weren't enough Filipino responses with explanations for me to pick out a common reason. Science was our most dominant color chosen in the overall poll, with green winning. Every single country stayed pretty dominant on green, with Canada and Brazil in particular having especially high percentages on green, both of them just barely under 50%. Only one country did not win with green. They didn't even win with obvious second place dark green either. Australia won with Cyan? Cyan was not chosen much at all in the original poll, or for any other countries, so the fact that Australia won with it is really bizarre to me. I didn't find any good reason for this. Maybe Australians happen to have a stronger association of chemicals being cyan? Who knows? Not me. The next 2 oddities both have to do with the United Kingdom. The UK confounds me. We saw Jim have a fairly dominant win with the oranges, among other hot colors also being highly selected. 2 minor differences were that Australia just barely had green win out, and Brazil instead won with yellow-orange over orange. The major difference with the United Kingdom was that the grayscale colors were especially dominant for Jim. I actually did find a reason for this, kind of. Basketball was the main reason for a lot of other countries, but that sport is much less prevalent in the UK. The sport that is more prevalent is soccer, or football, which has a white and black ball. I also think that there may be some association with the weather being rather dreary there, with grey and white skies. Again, I can't be sure about this though, since not very many people from the UK who submitted grayscale colors gave a reason. Finally, art was the most perplexing one. Art had a clear split between the pinks, purples, red, and white. Brazil was the most strong on pink, Canada and the Philippines won with white, and Australia won with red. The United Kingdom, on the other hand, won with black. This, for one, was the 12th most chosen color for art, absolutely nowhere near the top at all. But also, the black art win was extremely dominant in the UK, with a significantly higher percentage than its second most chosen color, red. To put that into further perspective, people from the United Kingdom made up only 9% of submissions for art. So, generally, you'd expect around 9% of the submissions for black to come from the United Kingdom. In actuality, a whole 60% of black submissions for art came from the United Kingdom. I could not find a concrete reason for this in the submissions, so I instead asked some of my friends why they thought this could be the case, and they said it was most likely due to these black sketchbooks that were assigned to them. The United Kingdom actually had a much stronger association with folders and notebooks than most other countries, and one of the main differences that I found was that people living in the UK were actually significantly more likely to have their folders and notebooks specifically assigned or given to them, instead of choosing them for themselves. I believe this did impact the data for the UK a lot more than any other country, although the assigned colors weren't consistent between people from the UK, so it didn't impact it as much as it could have, but it still did switch a lot of their top colors. Okay, enough of that. Here's a simplified version of the most chosen colors for each subject per country, again only including countries above 50 submissions. There's quite a number of ties, especially in the lower submitted countries. Here's a version of the same chart except with unique colors for each subject. All of the ones with ties I broke using the first color to reach the tied number of submissions. And finally, here's the average colors for each subject per country. I decided to include Germany for this one since they were just below 50 submissions. They have a number of strange differences, such as gym being yellow, art being a super light pink, math being much more blue, and business being very grey. Though, because there were so few submissions for Germany, I do kinda think a lot of this weirdness was just random chance. Just like the months video, I also looked at if people who answered yes that they had synesthesia had different answers to people who didn't. The answer to that was nope. The results pretty much matched the overall results nearly exactly. In some cases the winning color changed, such as red for art instead of pink, but like, red was only right behind pink in the overall poll, so it's really uninteresting. Kind of a shame, since I, as a synesthete, had radically different submissions for each color, and mine were never the most chosen. Alright, the last thing I want to discuss in this video is the final question. Which of these school subjects is your favorite? 1,837 people submitted to this question picking between the 12 subjects. 2 of the subjects ended up with a single-digit number of votes. Business in 12th with 5 votes, and home ec in 11th with 7 votes. 3 subjects had a double-digit number of votes. Gym or phys ed in 10th place with 32 votes, drama in 9th place with 40 votes, and English in 8th place with 90 votes. Didn't expect English to be so low, but also very happy because I always hated that stupid. Every other subject got at least 100 votes. 3 subjects all just barely squeaked into the 3-digit range. Music in 7th with 103 votes, history in 6th with 109 votes, and geography in 5th with 112 votes. In 4th place, rounding out votes in the 100 to 200 range, is art with 183 votes. Now, these top 3, very predictable considering the type of audience that watches my videos. In 3rd place with 202 votes is technology, in 2nd place with 238 votes is science, and coming up in 1st with an insane 716 votes, more than 3 times 2nd place, is math. So for my audience, math is the #1 subject, by quite a bit. Not surprising, since most of my previous videos are math videos. Well, that's the end of this video. Flashing across the screen right now are the charts for each individual color showcasing how many submissions it got per subject. I left this video with a lot of unanswered questions, particularly in the country section. If you're from one of those countries and think you know the answer to why this happened, please let me know in the comments. I think it would be really interesting seeing people hypothesize on why some of the countries were so different. I would also like to add that I have a bonus video going up on my second channel talking about some extra stuff from this poll that didn't really fit into this video. Primarily going over some of the individual responses that people sent that I either found interesting or funny. It's very much less edited and lower quality than this one, but still silly fun. Go look at that if you want, and maybe subscribe to that channel, cause I think I might also start using that channel for other stuff I want to talk about that are either smaller or less edited than the stuff on this channel. That's all for now though, thanks for watching!